You can't mog someone if no one sees it. You have to take a picture, or you have to take a video, and you have to post it online. All of this is performative bullshit. We're living in a stupid, performative world right now. Hey everyone, I'm Mike.
And I'm Andrew.
And we're the Midlife Guys. So before we begin, I will have to say this. It is very early in the morning. We are taping early in the morning because schedules just didn't work out for our normal time. So if I'm a little slow, bear with me. I have had my coffee, but it's very early in the morning. But we're going to talk about a very serious topic today, and one that I know Andrew and I have discussed at length. So we're going to just dive right in. Andrew, are you familiar with the term looks maxing?
Sadly, I am.
And mogging and bone smashing and frame mogging?
Yep. All of them. Ugh.
Yes. So these are terms that have become increasingly popularized by online influencers. And I definitely use those quotes in abundance. People like Clavicular and Andrew Tate, and I will also throw Mr. Beast into the mix here for a number of different reasons, but they're all representations of these individuals who have built a following of young men from doing stupid shit online. They're not creating anything meaningful. They're providing advice and in some ways entertainment. When your entire personality is based online, you're not building something. You're just a fucking grifter. So let's call it out for what it is. How are midlifers supposed to deal with this shit that is designed to feed and warp young men's minds? And then I want to pause for a second to also include young women too, because they are part of this conversation. And that's really what we want to talk about today. So on last week's show, we did a great conversation with our friend Braxton about being a dad, the ups and downs that come with being a dad and fatherhood, and how midlifers are managing their paternal responsibilities in a world that is changing very, very fast. One of the topics that we discussed briefly, very briefly, was the fact that both Andrew and Braxton take online safety very seriously for their two young children. They do this as much as possible to prevent their kids from engaging with these online influencers / predators. But this is going to become an increasingly challenging situation for parents because the number of influencers continues to grow as algorithms for YouTube and other streaming services and TikTok reward these individuals for the number of clicks and likes and stuff that they get. There's more and more incentive to become an influencer. We as a society, not just here in the US, but across the world, are putting too much emphasis on these individuals who have created a distorted reality of what it actually means to live. Because they're just curating content. So today we're going to talk about that online community, how to protect your kids from this toxic online behavior, and why this behavior really needs to be called out for what it is. It's just stupid as shit. And the media needs to wake up and call it for what it is, because I think they are heavily responsible for platforming individuals who don't deserve to be platformed. So, Andrew, are you ready to dive into this pretty important topic?
Yes. Yeah.
This early in the morning?
It is early. And it is an important topic, though. And I guess just a couple quick caveats from my end before we jump in. So I think one is this is a topic I know we've talked about a bunch. we did talk about with Braxton last week. This is probably the conversation my wife and I, we have it all the time, but we have most frequently with other parents, other midlifers who are parents, just because, as a lot of folks who have kids know, like it's impossible to avoid YouTube if you have a kid. That's kind of replaced TV. That's just what TV and entertainment is for, especially my kids are a little bit on the younger side. They do not get on TikTok. Are not allowed to be on TikTok. But I know older kids are more there and YouTube. But anyway, it's impossible to avoid. So this is a topic that I think a lot of midlifers and parents are talking about. It's an important one. I would make one slight distinction. I do think I agree with you that these are all kind of grifters and they're distorting reality. I think there is a slight difference between a Mr. Beast and a Clavicular or Andrew Tate. Like I think the perniciousness level is a little bit different, but they all are, I think, in that same category of, they're not creating anything really of value or I think instilling like, great lessons for kids. In fact, for some of them, like the Andrew Tates of the world, it's the exact opposite of that. And I guess the final thing just from my perspective as we kind of start out is I think, it's important to have these conversations. I agree with you. This is a really critical topic. You and I are not experts in online safety. We're obviously just giving our perspective from how we've experienced this. I'm certainly going to focus, I think, a lot on my experience with my wife and I and how we've approached this with our boys. But I certainly do encourage, all midlifers should know about this because it's touching all parts of our society. But if you're a parent too, definitely if you're not already paying close attention to this stuff, you really should be and looking for resources. And hopefully we can share some with you as well. But I think it's just important to know, like, we're not experts in this. We're sharing our perspective, but this is a topic that I think we all need to be talking about.
Mhm. All right. So let's start with the terminology that has been used by the media to describe this. I will
Mhm.
say the terminology is completely wrong, but for the sake of our SEO, I will start the conversation this way. So,
Let's
according to
play the game.
Mashable, yep, play the game. So, according to Mashable, these various members of the Manosphere have around 50 million followers worldwide. Doesn't sound like a huge number, but there are two things to know about that number. First, they're just trying to reach a very specific part of the population, mainly young men aged about 10 to 20 who have some sort of a financial means. So they're watching these videos and this content on mobile devices. So, yet again, you got to have some sort of financial means to have some of these mobile devices. Also, that number is continuing to grow and it's all based on the impressions. So it may be 50 million followers, but they have over a billion interactions with individuals, mainly because they have perfected a way to use these social media platforms through clipping. So they're not trying to get somebody to watch long form content like what we do with this podcast. Their goal is just to get across a very specific message through a short or a reel or a TikTok clip. Um, that's how they get their followers. That's how they get their views. And according to some counts, these individuals can get up to 500 million views per week because of these short form videos. Now, the Manosphere has gotten a lot of attention over the past several years because of their growing influence on young men. So much so that the United Nations has actually put out several reports about the impact these influencers are having on young men, not just here, yet again, in the US, but around the world, because there are a lot of countries that are trying to navigate this. So, according to a June 1st report from the United Nations, a young man's journey into the manosphere starts like this. First, when we remember 10 to 20. So, step one, a search for self improvement. Who remembers being in that 10 to 20 age? You know, as a teenager, we were
Super
constantly
awkward,
figuring
right?
out super fucking awkward, super fucking awkward. When you're a teenager, You're trying to figure out a lot of stuff. You're trying to figure out which clothes are cool. You're trying to figure out, girls, how to impress girls and all of this stuff. And so it makes sense um, that young men are looking this up. When Andrew and I were coming up, but when we were that age, there really was no internet, so we
Not
didn't
yeah,
have
not really. It was like, or at least it
that.
was all like, like
Was
it was like find a cat video or something, right? Like it wasn't what it is
I
today,
don't even remember that was a
Or
thing.
that,
We
I don't
just
know.
didn't have
Yeah.
much of anything. Um, Step 2, then the algorithm steps in for these platforms when a teenager is looking up these things and recommends videos about building discipline or building high value, getting respect, and yes, looks maxing, because that's such a popular term now. Um, Step 3, it goes into this phase of the cost of becoming a real man. Content starts framing success around dominance, control, and financial prowess. Um, and there's things like paid courses or, all kinds of things around quick ways that you can make money or look better and things of that nature. It's just trying to get people to buy things. Step 4 is, after looking at this content or doing one of these online courses or whatever you want to call it, that manifests itself into rage against. The report said, the United Nations report said rage against women specifically, which is true, but it goes on to illustrate the fact that it's not just against women, it's also against others.
Yeah.
So it's a whole process of othering people. You are not to blame for um, any challenges that you were facing in your awkward teenage years. And sorry, guys, every teenager has awkward years and it's not going to be that great. Somebody else is to blame. So it's constantly figuring out someone else to blame. Step 5 is the common enemy. So figuring out how to connect with other people who are viewing these videos or absorbing this content and coming together to collectively blame specific communities, whether it be women or a specific minority group or whomever. It's blaming somebody. And that's when more extreme content is recommended. Um, we're all trying to figure out who we are when we're a teenager. So this is not new. It just, yet again, these online influencers didn't exist when we were coming up. And so I can understand how it's a slippery slope for these young men as they're trying to navigate the world. Um, so Andrew, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Again, there's a lot there. I think, I mean, that progression certainly, from what I've talked to, especially parents with kids who are a little bit older, talk about this progression and they can see that, and you have to be careful and mindful of it. I think the other thing that's tough too is, to your point, Mike, when we were growing up and even generations before us, like you didn't have these influencers the same way you do today. I also think the other big difference too is it feels like they're everywhere, right? Like you can't turn anywhere online without seeing some of this stuff in some way, shape, or form. And it's kind of fed to you or fed to kids consistently. So it's like hard to escape it, which I think is another big challenge. When I was thinking about this topic in preparation for the show today, there were kind of four concerns that I see a lot, and it's really been my experience, even with my boys who are a little bit younger than this. And so, like, the first one is the slippery slope thing, which I think you're right is something that a lot of parents need to be mindful of. And it's something that, like, I'm not joking when I say keeps me up at night. Like, I do worry about how to counteract this because, as much as my wife and I try to stay on top of everything and we do look at everything our kids are watching right now, I still feel like I might miss something because even innocuous things will lead in like this random direction. A good example is my son. in the past couple months in school was learning about different historic sites, and he started looking up videos about what these historic sites look like today, right? Like, seems like a totally normal, kind of interesting, let's learn something type of an approach. And he started to get some videos from this one person whose name I actually now completely forget, but was going back to like sites from like the ancient Egypt and the Holy Land and stuff, and like in the Bible, like what do they look like today? And so I was asking him about this, and I was watching one of the videos with them. And at first, it seems, like, oh, it's fine. And then the person, whoever the influencer, who's some young guy in his mid 20s, who's going to these places and talking about them today, starts like talking about like angels and the apocalypse really quickly. And then a couple minutes later starts like having some coded messaging around like nationalism. I'm like, this is messed up that we're like 3 minutes into this video about what's supposed to be like, what, like, let's look at like what Jerusalem it looks like today. And then it becomes like this whole other thing. And it was just crazy to me. And so we turned it off. He's not like that person's now blocked from our feed. And we had to have a little conversation about like, well, what do we learn from this? Or why do I think this is not the best person to watch? And we can find other resources if you want to learn about historic sites or whatnot. But like that slippery slope, I think what the UN report has is correct, but I feel like sometimes it's even quicker than that. And it just like it turns, and these algorithms again just start feeding more and more of these messages that have this coded language in it that I just think is really dangerous. And kids aren't going to know or pick up on it. And they'll start to probably just like accept these things because they kind of think that what they see on YouTube is all true, which it's not. So anyway, that was just a really kind of disturbing example that we had recently that I think leads or shows that there's this slippery slope is a legit thing. The other thing you had mentioned earlier, which is a concern that I think is very true too, is this idea of sort of reality distortion. And here's where I put a lot of those kind of Manosphere influencers all together, from Mr. Beast running the gamut or whatnot. Is like so much of this, and we have to constantly remind our sons, like, it's not real. This isn't how actual people live their lives. Like, you have videos of these influencers in their private jet or their big mansion or these Lamborghinis or crazy cars. It's like, that's not what most people or anyone's experience is. I also would probably guess and would put money down that even those influencers, as you say, quote unquote, are just renting this stuff, right? There's been so many written about how even like it's all just projection. None of it's actually real. They don't own any of these things. But like that reality distortion is a thing if you're a kid because you're very susceptible to that. You think like, oh, this is how everybody acts. Like, no, this is not the real world. The other thing that I'm really concerned about that I think is worthwhile, especially for younger kids, is them creating these kind of parasocial relationships with these influencers where they think they're their friends, or they start referring to them like by their first name, or they think like, oh, I'm kind of, hanging out with so and so on YouTube. It's like, no, dude, they're not your friends. They don't know you. You need to focus on having real life friends you can go and play with and interact with and have human experiences with. And then the final thing that I think is a huge concern is everything being pushed towards these clips, like you had talked about, Mike, especially whether it's TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, which more and more that's all that's getting pushed, at least when we're with our kids and seeing what they're watching on YouTube. It's all shorts is what they're getting, pushed. And I think, to borrow a word from the youngins these days, it all leads to brain rot, like this rewiring your brain because you're getting these quick hits of something. And even like a traditional TV show, you got to sit there for 30 minutes and at least like understand the development of a story or an arc or whatever it is, as outlandish as it might be. You've got to wait for the payoff. But these shorts will just like come at you nonstop. And again, these platforms are pushing them. I know we've seen this like with our channel, right? Like when we put up shorts or clips from the podcast episodes, like they get a lot more views than the regular long form ones. So clearly YouTube is proactively pushing these shorts. And I think it's bad for kids. That's my
Yeah, I mean,
soapbox. What do you think?
clearly yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, yet again, it's not just YouTube. It's all of these
That's
platforms are
true. Yeah.
pushing the short content. Um, I worry about what that means for just our attention spans, or younger, not
Yeah.
our attention spans, our younger generation's attention spans. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's not great. Um, yeah, I mean, I really empathize with parents who are trying to manage this, and trying to manage their children's online behavior. Um, because yet again, as I said earlier, this is not just a boy issue. This is a girl issue
Yep.
too. Because there's a lot of shitty fucking content out there that is designed in theory to help teenagers find their way. But guess fucking what? YouTube or TikTok is not going to sit there and help you find your way. Part of being a teenager means making mistakes. And yes, embarrassment is going to come with that as a teenager. And there's going to be a lot of things that happen in your teenage years, which are not going to be great. But you know what? It's going to help you have a much better life moving forward, especially after 20. um, I can speak from experience about that. You know, it is confusing being a teenager. I honestly don't know what the right answer is here because as much as parents are trying to help moderate or to moderate online content that their kids are watching, there's always some new platform that pops up,
Yep.
or there's some new way that they're disguising their content. Kind of like your example about um, looking up historical sites. Why aren't you just going to Rick Steves? Rick Steves is
We've
amazing.
started now. We're doing that or National Geographic or other places. But again, he was just going on YouTube and typing in like, whatever, like historic sites, or I think he went to look at was studying Jerusalem and Egypt in school and whatnot. And like that's what they were. But then it just feeds up. And this I think goes to a central point that's really important that I think you're right. There isn't, I don't think, one answer, and I don't have an answer for parents, but I do believe for sure one thing is true is that these platforms do not care about your children. They don't care about my kids. They don't care about anybody's kids. They want to monetize them. They do not care what they're pushing to them. They're pushing whatever content they think are going to hook their children, hook kids, and make them addicted to their sites so they can further monetize them. That I believe is 100% true. And that's something parents have to be vigilant for. And it's insane that there's a whole other topic. There's a more regulation around this, but yeah, I do not trust any of these platforms to have anyone's best interest, but how they make more money.
There will never be regulation about this
There
in this
won't be. I think
country.
that's probably true.
Never,
Yeah.
ever, ever. Because
Yeah.
quite frankly, the United States government, both parties have completely fucking failed because
That is true.
these Silicon Valley folks can make a fuck ton of money off of just monetizing us as consumers of
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
media and content. So, as I said, I don't have any answers. I wish I did. Um, you know, are you going to ban your children from ever using social media or watching YouTube? No, you can't do that.
I don't think that's
Um,
possible. Yeah, it's hard. I don't yeah. Mhm.
yeah. So, all right. So before we get to the solutions or ways you can protect your children from these online pariahs, because they are fucking pariahs, I want to have a quick conversation about my opinions. It's my opinions and my opinions alone on the manosphere. First off, I honestly, um, I empathize with parents and I understand teenage anxiety, but how in the fuck did we get here? How did we get here as a society, a global society? As I said at the top of the show, I really believe that all of this content is incredibly stupid, and we need to call it out for what it is. It's stupid. And unfortunately, I think the number of organizations and governments and media keep labeling these things incorrectly. They come up with terms like manosphere or toxic masculinity. And sure, it is toxic, but the problem is you're creating these labels that in reality, they're just making this content more attractive to young men.
Yeah.
If you're a young boy trying to figure out what it means to be a man, I think that labeling something as masculine, even in a derogatory way, inadvertently creates more of a draw for these young men who are looking for answers in a very awkward period of their lives. Um, Yet again, we need to call this for what it fucking is, stupid as shit. And the harm is incredible. I mean, there was just an article. Oh, there was two fascinating articles this week. We should leave the links in the show
Show
notes.
notes. Yeah.
One of them was about Andrew Tate and what a fucking
Mhm.
piece of shit he is, as a
Yeah.
rapist, as a grifter, and as somebody who really sees himself as above the law. Guess what, bitch? At some point, you will either be dead or behind bars. I guarantee it. Second, was talking about the looks maxing efforts that these usually it's later teenage years men are undertaking is actually so damaging to their bodies that it is destroying their sperm count. So if one of being a man is so important and having kids is part being this tough man, you're not going to be able to because you ain't got no fucking sperm. So stop dicking around. Jesus Christ. And you know, if you really think about this, all of the concepts that these people are preaching are designed to create an army of online creators. You can't mog someone if no one sees it. You have to take a picture, or you have to take a video, and you have to post it online. All of this is performative bullshit. We're living in a stupid performative world right now where perceived value comes from acting like an asshole online to get followers. We're acting, this is all too immature and too stupid. There's no value to any of this either. If these individuals get deplatformed, they're sick and they can't post, or they die, guess what? The money evaporates. It's gone. There's no new money coming in if you're not constantly feeding the beast here. So there's no value. There's no actual value for what you're doing. Yet again, these entirely performative lives are nothing but empty, shallow holes of individuals. We need to end this bullshit as a society, and we need to end it today. We need to stop letting these idiots create content that is confusing an age group that is already filled with anxiety as they're trying to navigate an increasingly complex world. We need to cut off their oxygen now. We need to illustrate, especially to young men, because there is research to show that young men in those teenage years are having a rough time, but we need to show them that building something is actually what becoming a man is all about. And that could be building a family, it could be building friendship base, building a business, building a career, building knowledge, building a better world than the one you were born into. That is what being a man is actually about. It's about building something that future generations can appreciate and enjoy. It's not about mogging or looks maxing or blaming someone else that you can't get a fucking date. That is on you. You need to grow the fuck up. Being a man is about becoming mature, learning about successes and failures, because you will fail, you will make mistakes, and failure makes you stronger. Also, parents have got to step in here, because I think this is, yet again, I can preach from the sidelines not being a parent, but I feel like a big part of this issue is coming from parents who are letting their kids go down these rabbit holes. I mean, what parent is actually allowing their child to go through surgeries so that they can looks max? Well, apparently quite a few, according to um, uh, reports that have come out this year. As a matter of fact, it's tens of thousands of parents who are letting their kids do this.
Is it really? Wow,
It's insane.
that's
It's
wild.
insane.
Yeah.
And the media needs to grow up. Call this out for what it is, performative tomfuckery. The media needs to step up and stop letting this dancing around for what this is. It's trying to psychoanalyze these idiots and start calling them out for what they fucking are. There's my rant.
I would just like to say that despite it being early in the morning, you still seem sufficiently riled up. So that's good to know.
Well,
n-
this is definitely, as we've discussed, this is a topic we're both fired
it
up
is no, and
about.
I'm joking, but yeah, I do think it is worth being riled up about. That's for sure. I mean, there was a lot in your comments there. I generally agree with you. I do think what stands out to me is that a lot of this is all performative. And as I was saying earlier, I don't know how much of it's actually real. Like, do they have all these things, or is it all just kind of performative, and it does kind of feel like a virus to some extent, right? That it's just kind of feeding on itself. And to your point, you're just trying to recruit more people to follow whatever path these influencers think will get them, I don't know, more love, attention, whatever it is, money. I don't know what it is, but I don't think a lot of it's real. You know, I'll just mention two other things that I think about a lot when it relates to this. One is what we talked about a little bit already, which how do we get here is I don't I don't have the one answer. I don't think there is one single answer. I think there are two big factors that are contributing. One, I think, is the fact that we collectively as a society for the past 20 plus years have sort of just allowed social media, including video platforms, just kind of consume us. Like we've all become addicted to it, not just kids, midlifers have, people in other generations. Like we've all allowed these tech companies to just sort of take over to a big extent, and I don't think that's helpful. And I think too, as I'd mentioned a few minutes ago, I blame a lot of this for those platforms themselves. Like, yes, we need to stop giving the oxygen to the influencers, but the main reason they have oxygen, sure, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, say, well, everyone's watching this. I call BS on that. They're watching it because you're putting it in front of them, because your algorithms are forcing more rage, more extreme content that you think are gonna, get people to keep watching. So I do think a lot of the blame falls on these platforms, and to the extent that parents can, and it's a lot of work and it's overwhelming. And I feel being overwhelmed because it feels like it is everywhere. It's just like monitor what your kids are watching as much as you can, have conversations with them about what they're watching and what you think, what your perspective on that is, whether it's good or bad. And like that kind of leads to the second thing that I think is something we need to sort of address or think through. And again, I don't have a clear answer here, but I do think, and you sort of touched on this, Mike, that we as adults in general, and as men in particular, like we need to be more active in the lives of in kids who are in our lives. We need to be more active in their lives. We need to model good behavior, and model what it does mean to be a man, how it is about building things, about respect, about working hard, how it is to treat not just girls, but other men and women. It just if I think it's you've got to we've got we it's on us to do a better job to model that behavior and to be there for young kids more and more because they are surrounded by this stuff. And so if all the input they're getting is this crap from YouTube or TikTok or whatnot, like of course they're going to be in crisis. So I think like we need to step up and do a better job of modeling the behavior that we think is important. And I think we also do need to kind of acknowledge that as you mentioned, boys in particular have had, I think there's been sort of a crisis of purpose maybe within the past generation or so. So like how do we again step in and try to address that on a real human level? It's not easy, but I think that's what we have to do.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I will say two quick things before getting into the final thing. It's like, um, there was a recent story, which yet again, are you talking about feeding into this and the behavior that it's creating? It was a recent incident at the Hershey amusement park up in Pennsylvania, where it's
Yeah, I
like
hear about this.
30 teenage boys um, started a huge brawl at the park just
Oh,
so they could record it and post it on social media. So yet
yeah,
again, we're just becoming a performative audience, and yet again,
performative.
these
Yeah,
kids it's just. But I will say, and we've talked a little bit about this before. I think the number of parents who are re-engaging their kids in like um, athletics, whether it be
yeah.
baseball or basketball or whatever, is growing. So I feel like parents are trying to figure out a way in which to direct their children away from this online content. But yeah, it's a process. It's a process. All right.
And
So the final
it's hard.
segment,
Yeah,
yeah, is talking about that United Nations report again, and some steps that they have outlined that parents can take to ensure their sons don't fall into the manosphere rabbit hole. The first step was starting with connection and curiosity, not just shutting off the videos and not being controlling, but asking, what do you like about this person? Why is this interesting to you? Yet again, a two-way conversation being better than just interrogating a young person because then they're going to feel judged. Um,
yeah.
help them question what they're looking at. Yet again, and we've talked about this at length, is like apparently we as a society have lost our ability to think critically. But this step is really important, especially during those teenage years. You've got to exercise that critical thinking muscle. What's the message? What is the message that this influencer is giving to you? And do you think that what they're saying is true or what they're doing is true? Um, why do you think he has so many viewpoints or views? And have you noticed things like sponsored or ad hashtags within these posts? Just get them to think more critically about who these people are and what their motivations might be. Um, the third step is making space for conversations they're not having. Um, strong relationships with parents or and adults too. I definitely want to include like grandparents
Hmm.
in this conversation, as well as other role models, whether it be coaches or teachers or whomever. Boys are often taught not to show emotion and don't ask for help and be strong. And yeah, you can do that, but to a certain extent, I mean, you can normalize what it means to be vulnerable because every guy
Yeah.
is going to have emotions. Um, it's you gotta sit there and create a space, a safe space for these young men to share their emotion. If you don't have any emotions as a human being, you're just a robot. So, um, including young boys. So, showing that you're struggling or showing that you're confused is not failure in any way, shape, or form. It just means you've got questions, and we all have questions. Um, offer alternatives uh, to these young men, not just warnings. Create spaces where they feel like they can thrive or belong. Yet again, that could be athletics. It could be, you know, uh, I don't know. It could be a million and one things. I don't, it depends on your sons. Um, you know, give them positive role models like coaches or teachers or somebody that can help them as they're navigating this path. Staying calm, I think that's always going to be a challenge for parents. You know, if your child opens up and is met with anger or fear or punishment, they're going to shut down,
Yeah.
especially when your hormones are crazy in those 10 to 20 years. So you stay calm, thank them for sharing their thoughts. You just need to keep that conversation going with your kid. And finally, remember that girls are impacted by this bullshit too. We've seen research that a lot of young women are stepping back from these online spaces because it's gotten so toxic, but they need to have the conversation with their parents as well, or parents need to have the conversation with their young women, with their daughters as well, because um, it's polarizing and it hurts everybody. Andrew,
Yeah. It doesn't seem to be slowing down either, which is a sad part.
yes,
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, that's great. I agree with all of that. I think that report has a lot of helpful recommendations that you just went through. And, this is something, again, that we can put in our show notes to have as a resource, as I mentioned at the top. I think that's a great example of a resource that I do some of that, or we try to do some of that already. My wife and I do with our sons, especially leading with curiosity and questions. But I'm definitely going to go back and reference that some more for other tips that we can use. So I think that's all great. The only other thing I'll add to it that in my experience has been helpful, and I think this might look a little different for everyone depending on your family and your background, and that's okay that it looks different. But for us and for my family at least, it's been helpful to sort of have consistent values that we articulate a lot about things that our family believes in or things that are important to our family. Now, for us specifically, that's based in faith, or a lot of it's grounded in kind of our faith, and our kids go to Catholic schools, so a lot of those same values about respect and dignity and compassion and sort of being accepting of others. Um, is all sort of reinforced at school, which is nice. You kind of they sort of get that a lot, but just having I think what's been helpful is having language that we all use and understand about things that are important to us and values and what like we believe about ourselves and about other people, I think helps to have some of these conversations because we have sort of a shared vocabulary to talk about this. And again, it's something that not just in terms of videos, but we talk about a lot. And so I think maybe other families that might be helpful as well. It doesn't have to be based on faith, but just what are the values that your family thinks is important and how can you talk about those in lots of different ways so that when you have these conversations about these influencers or what your kids are seeing, again, you have sort of a shared understanding about what's really important to your family. And I think just that goes back to the idea of just reinforcing strong values in your kids and that doesn't just happen naturally. Like you've got to work at that and really consistently remind them like what's important and why it's important.
Yeah. I do think faith leaders can also be a very good role
Yeah.
model for young men as they're trying
That's
to
true too.
navigate the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's important. Yeah, I mean, this report and the recommendations it provides all make sense to me. You know, we need to wake up and we need to make sure that young men and young women understand that these assholes are targeting them. We need
Yeah.
to they want something out of these young men and young
Hmm.
women. Um, and I think that's a conversation worth having.
Yep.
So with that, long show, Andrew. Long show.
Again, that's okay.
I know. Important show, but long
It
show.
is. Yeah.
All right. If you've not done so already, please like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it helps us out a lot. Remember that you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartMedia, and all your favorite podcasting platforms. And until next week, good luck, guys.
See ya.